thank you so much for coming, Roohe. We're really happy to have you.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's always kind of embarrassing to hear the bio, but appreciate it. Is it kind of loud? Can I adjust the... I feel like if I just breathe, you can hear. Okay. I do talk loud, so I'll do my best. I don't know if they're controlling the volume on a different angle. But anyways, so Sister Amina Khan actually had really wanted me to do this workshop. I spoke a few months back, I think, at the session that Deciphering had on cancer, breast cancer awareness. So that was a really amazing event that you held. And I love how Civic has a lot of really nice different workshops and events. So she's been asking me to come. She's like, we need a workshop on food labels. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be hardcore. So I want people to have food labels. I'm going to be walking around. We're really going to try to use this information because this is what you're doing every day when you go to the grocery store, right? How many of you already read food labels? I think as Muslims, we've always read food labels because what were some of the things that we were looking out for? Gelatin, right? What else? Sorry? Pork products, right? Anything else? Yeah, well, yeah, sugar. But as Muslims, mostly it was like gelatin, right? And any pork products. And I remember as a kid that Oreo cookies used to have gelatin. Does anyone remember? Or gelatin, lard. Does anyone remember this? Because some of you, this is before your time. And I remember we would get mad as kids. How come all the other kids get to have hydroxy cookies and we have to have, we have to have hydroxy and all the other kids get Oreos. And I remember it was a highlight of my childhood when they took out lard from Oreos and we're like, yay, now we can have Oreos like everybody else. But so as Muslims, this is something we kind of do, right? We want to make sure our food is, of course, not only halal, right? So that's important, but tayyib is also important too, where it's pure. And this is where label reading is really helpful for us. But we're also reading labels for other reasons. So what are some of the other reasons that you are already reading labels?
Fat, carbs, sugar.
Okay, so fat, carbs, sugar. So you're looking at actual nutrients. Sodium. Saturated fat. But why are you all looking at these ingredients or these nutrients? To get healthy, diabetes, maybe we have different conditions that we're concerned about. So today we're going to have a very in-depth workshop here, inshallah, about how to read these food labels because it can sometimes feel like a science, right? When you go to the grocery store, like I know sometimes as a dietitian, when I go to the grocery store and I see people like standing, I'm like, should I do an intervention? Should I help them? I'm like, forget it. I don't have time. But so that's the way I like to do these workshops to hopefully get us this information to help us for our health and well-being. So we know what we are eating. And now, I don't want to get political, but as things are kind of changing in terms of, governmental regulations, it's even more important for us to be aware of what is in our products. Because unfortunately, a lot of oversight that was previously happening. I was reading the other day about how they're not going to be analyzing milk as they did previously. So I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see what's happening. It's going to be an interesting next few years. So even more so we want to kind of be aware of what we're eating and what's in our food supply on our end as much as possible. So I am actually, this workshop is being co-sponsored also with the Rahma Foundation. Have any of you heard of the Rahma Foundation? If not, well, now you will. So this is a female-based organization, and we are really big on female scholarship, not just in the Islamic sciences, but in all different fields. And last September, we actually had a big wellness conference that we did. I don't know if any of you were able to attend in Yorba Linda. And we just covered spiritual wellness, physical wellness, mental wellness, and financial wellness as well. And one of our goals from that workshop was to do more events that are focused on overall health and well-being. So not just the spiritual, but like holistic. So this is hopefully a little offshoot of that, and we have a lot of programming in the works. So stay tuned. We do have a mailing list if anyone's interested in. You can just go onto the Rahma Foundation. So we're different from the Rahma Center. That's in Lake Forest. So we're different. We're a different organization. But if you go on our website, you can actually sign up for the mailing list. And we have a lot of different events. We have weekly halakas that Dr. Rania Awad, who is like really foremost authority, mashallah, on Muslims and mental health. She does a halakha every Friday night. We have a whole bunch of other talks going on. Actually, right now, as I'm speaking, my sister-in-law, Usada Shamira, she's doing a workshop in the Bay Area on childbirth and the Islamic spiritual aspect of that as well. So a lot of things going on. So I just want to give a little shout out to the Rahma Foundation, and of course, shout out to Civic for hosting all these great events. So our agenda for today, and everyone, please feel free to take breaks. The restrooms, I think, are right there and on the left here. If you want to grab some tea, if you need to do some jumping jacks, that's fine. What I'm going to try to do is every half hour, I'm going to call out, or someone can remind me that, hey, it's been half an hour. I just want us to kind of get up really quick and maybe just kind of do little stretches, or even just sit in your seat and move your feet. Because this is a little side note, but research actually shows that if we get up every 30, 45 minutes, right, do some sort of movement, do some squats, do some, just moving our hands and legs, that actually helps with not only our circulation, but our blood sugars. And even though you may not have diabetes, this is a concern for the population at whole. So I kind of want to practice what I preach. So I'm going to call out, okay, it's been 30 minutes, you guys. So you can just, again, move your hands, get some movement going. So we can incorporate that. Anyway, so our agenda for today is, okay, why in the world should we even read labels in the first place? So we'll talk about that. Common pitfalls, because it is very confusing when we get out there, right? Like, what's going on here, right? Wow, this is plant-based. This means it's healthy, right? But that may not be the case. A big question, actually, my mom was even talking about this in the car. Not directly, and I didn't answer her because I was going to talk about it here. But organic, yay or nay? Right? That's a big question. So we'll talk about that. And then we're really going to dig deep. We're going to decode ingredients, and then we're going to look at the nutrition panel itself. What should I be looking at? What's important? And you guys, please feel free to answer questions. Otherwise, it gets boring very quick. So I got to keep everyone awake. So you already mentioned right now some of the reasons that you are reading food labels, right? We're looking for our health. Some of you might have certain conditions. Some of you might have diabetes. Some of you might have high cholesterol. Some of you might have high blood pressure. Some of you just are curious what is in our products, right? So the value of reading food labels is it really helps improve our diets. And this is really important for us. I mean, I don't want to get into the importance of health as a Muslim, right? But we all know, right, that our body is an amana. It's a trust. So Allah is going to ask us how we treated it. And we have all this information, right? So we don't want to oppress our bodies by feeding it unhealthy food. And unfortunately, if you look now, our whole food industry has dramatically changed, right? How many of you guys just even in the last, in our lifetimes, right? So it's really interesting. So how many of you have heard of Wonder Bread? Wonder Bread, right? It's like a good, I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying it's like, in the 50s, they would have like, Wonder Bread commercials. Not that we were there, but I'm just saying that it was a very popular bread, right? And it's interesting because if you look at the ingredients from the 1950s, what do you think the ingredients of Wonder Bread was at that time? Flour, oil, sugar, water, like very basic, right? Like what you would put in bread. What do you think the ingredients are now of Wonder Bread? Right? Lots of random stuff, right? Sometimes you're like, what is this chemical? Like, what am I eating? What's going on here? Right? Our industry now has become very ultra processed. And this actually is a big issue, everyone, that we really want to be aware of. And this is one of the best things that we can do, just like right away, like today, is really do our best to cut out ultra processed foods. So what in the world is ultra processed? How would you guys define that? So if I gave you a quiz, what's ultra processed? What would you say? Preservatives, chemicals, anything that comes in a bag. But what if it's bagged, or not bagged, but even canned beans? Would that be considered ultra processed? Actually, no, that would be considered minimally processed. So ultra-processed, think of how many steps from farm to table. All right, if there's like a lot of steps, right, that means it's pretty processed. Another way to think about it is, okay, let's suppose you have something at home, right? Cheetos, let's just give an example. Or like kids really like, what is it, the Takis now, right? Could you make Takis or Cheetos at home easily in your kitchen? Like, how would you even start, right? Whenever I teach kids, I'm like, how would you make Cheetos? They're like, we don't know and we don't care, because they love the Cheetos, right? But like, what's the base ingredient, right? So think of it that way. If there is some product where you can't make in your kitchen easily without certain chemicals or without certain equipment, that means it's ultra processed, right? Like you don't know like how it started. You don't know how they made this. So things like bread and pasta and beans and things that are canned that don't have that many ingredients are okay. That's minimally processed. But ultra processed is really like, I don't even know, like how did this happen, right? So those type of foods we really want to do our best to eliminate, because what's really interesting, you guys, this is a whole other topic I can come another time to talk about, is it really affects our gut microbiome. And we're learning a lot about our gut microbiome and how that can influence our overall health and well-being. Even down to how our body is using energy, how our body is processing food, whether someone is a little bit more susceptible to being overweight or not, might come down actually to our gut. It's very fascinating. So these ultra-processed foods can really mess with our gut microbiome, right? And they're also very addictive. It's very easy to eat a lot, right? Like think about how easy it is for us to eat a bag of chips, right? Pretty easy, right? And it's a lot of calories at once. So for example, let's suppose I had a bag of chips that's about 200 calories, small bag of chips, easy to eat. And then we're probably like, what else am I going to eat after, right? We can probably eat some more food with that. But imagine eating about 4 cups of broccoli, which is roughly, give or take, about the same amount of calories. Can we do that? Like physically, let's suppose you love broccoli. Some of you are like, no, I don't like broccoli, but pretend you do, right? Can you physically eat that much broccoli? No, and it's hard to eat that. But ultra-processed foods, it's easy to eat a lot, and we get a lot of calories all at once, right? And it's really interesting. They do a lot of interesting research studies. So they did a research study where they actually had 2 groups of people. And one group of people, they're like, okay, they gave them kind of minimally processed foods, like good foods, and they're like, eat as much as you want. The other group had all ultra-processed foods, like mashed potato. You know mashed potatoes, like you can make with like flakes, mashed potato flakes, those type of things. Everything was very ultra-processed. And they told them, eat as much as you want. Which group do you think ended up just eating more? The ultra-processed food, because it's easy, right? So that goes back to us, is when we're eating lots of those food, it's addictive. Like literally, they're looking at food addiction, right? Because it has a high amount of sugar, high amount of fat, high amount of salt, and it's like a party in our brain. Our brains are, I love it, I love all this sugar, I love all this, right? And we want more. The more you eat, the more you want. So one of the best things we can do, and it's not easy, is to cut out those ultra-processed foods or to eliminate or to reduce them. And in the beginning, it's going to be hard. I know, I think I don't know if Breen, you've been in it before, but every few years, actually maybe less than that, I do this sugar challenge, or I put it out there, where it's like 2 weeks, no added sugar. So you can have fruit, but you can't add sugar to your tea. You can't have like desserts, right? And some of you already look stressed. Don't worry, you're not doing it. But I'm just saying this is, some of you look very worried. I'm just saying this is like something that we would do usually around New Year's. Did you ever do it in Breen? Anyways, I'm not put you on the spot, but it's not easy. In the beginning, there's literally withdrawals. People get headaches, they get cranky. I had a patient once, she's like, I was gonna go to urgent care, but then I remembered, oh yeah, this is why I cut out my sugar, because she thought something was wrong with her. But it's like our body's very addicted to sugar. It's very easy to eat sugar and get addicted to it. But unfortunately, there's no benefit to sugar. Like there's nothing good about sugar other than it tastes good, right? We're not getting any nutrients from it. And they actually did research studies on lab rats, mice or rats, whatever, and they gave them sugar and they gave them cocaine. Which do you think those rats were more addicted to? Sugar. Okay, disclaimer. Cocaine is not better than sugar, okay? I don't want anyone taking this on a live stream and thinking weird things, but it's just showing that it's very addictive. And so when you remove sugar or decrease it, and we're going to be talking about that, kind of like what to look at, what to do, it's not easy, but once you remove it, you're going to start tasting the natural sweetness of foods. Right? I had a patient once, and I was looking at her food record, and it was strawberry season. And she was adding sugar to her strawberries. I'm like, why are you adding sugar to your strawberries? We're in peak strawberry season. Like, strawberries are sweet right now. She's like, no, it doesn't taste sweet to me. And I was looking at the rest of her food record, and she was eating a lot of artificial sweetener. So those Splenda packets, the yellow packets, the pink packets, the blue packets. We'll talk about that, don't worry. So she was eating a lot of it, so her taste buds really got numbed down. So she wasn't able to taste the sweetness, natural sweetness of foods. So anyways, we'll talk more about sugar. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the point of the matter is taking a look at the food labels is going to help us improve our diets. Also, it gives us nutrition information. I know a lot of times people get skeptical. Can we trust these food labels? Can we trust what they're writing? So keep in mind, yes, you can, but the front of the label is a commercial. Right? It's a commercial. It wants to draw us in, right? It looks really nice. It looks like, wow, right? And there's a whole industry called industrial psychology that actually studies us. It studies humans to see, okay, what do people like and what will people buy? And they've done a lot of interesting research to kind of to pull us in. So for instance, they did research on chips. I don't know why I keep talking about chips, but here it is. And can anyone guess what the perfect chip is? It doesn't mean it's perfect to eat. I'm just saying like perfect, like crunch-wise, taste-wise, and it makes people want to eat more. Can anyone guess what that chip is? I talked about it earlier, actually. Cheetos. Okay, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying they did research like, okay, the crunch factor is really nice. It tastes like you're eating air, right? And people want to eat more. So there's a whole industry, you guys, analyzing it. Every time we go to the grocery store, right, and we use the reward cards, they're tracking what we are buying. And then all of a sudden you start getting those coupons, right? Or those advertisements. So they're tracking us. They want to know what we are buying. And we can be very brand loyal, right? How many of you have certain brands, like this is the type of bread I buy, this is the type of milk I drink, and this is what I'm buying, right? So they know that, and they want to pull us in. So the front of the label, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, is a commercial. So try your best to kind of look at it, okay, cool, but turn it over and actually look at the nutrition panel. That is where we're going to see a lot of that information that is regulated by the government. There are certain things that have to be on the label. All right, so, hold on, let me go back. Okay. So buyers beware. As I mentioned, packaging is an advertisement. And even where foods are placed. So have you guys ever noticed where things are? So when you're at the checkout stand, what kind of things are right there? Candies, right? Magazines. Now everyone's on their phone, so no one's paying attention anyways. But once upon a time, we did pay attention, and people would go, oh, wow, that's that candy. Or your kid is there, and they're like eye level to the candy. I want that. And they throw their tantrum right there, right? And then you purchase it. If you ever look at the aisles, where do they place kids' cereals? Eye level to the kid, right? So the kid's holding on to the cart, they're walking, they're bored, they look over, oh my gosh, Tony the Tiger, I saw this on TV, I want this. Right? So it's very strategic where they're placing things. It's also very strategic what products are where. Right? Like my sister lives in the Bay Area and my brother, and they have they have a lot of more halal products there, like Costco. They have a lot of other products there that we don't have here, because of the population, right? So that also influences what products are being sold and where they are. I remember years ago I was in South Orange County, and I just ran into the store really quick to grab something, and I remember at the checkout stand where they usually have candy, guess what they had there? in a little refrigerator case? Any guesses? Single serving salads. And I was like, wow, instead of candy, they have salads here because that population wasn't buying the candy. They wanted the salad, right? Because they were a little bit more health conscious, I guess. So it's really interesting. And if you think about it, ideally, when we're at the grocery store, we should try our best to shop the perimeter of the store, like the outside of the store, right? Not outside, but the outer aisle. So think about it. Think of your grocery store you go to, you walk in, not Trader Joe's, you walk into your other grocery store, your Albertsons or wherever. What's on the right-hand side? Produce, right? So your produce, then you go around the aisle, you see your eggs, your milk, right? The fish, the meats, cheese, and then you go around the other aisle, and then what is there? Breads, the bakery, ignore the bakery, but, right? Everything essential is there. It's those inner aisles that are where those dangerous foods are, I guess you can say, right? So even when we're shopping, have a list, stick to your list, right? That's gonna be really helpful too. So a lot of times we find that manufacturers are labeling on the front of the item things that are not there, and then people get very drawn in. Like, for example, how many of you have heard of gluten? And how many of you think gluten-free is what we have to be doing? We all should be gluten-free. This is really bad for us. Okay. So gluten is a protein that's found in wheat, rye, and barley. Okay, so wheat, rye, and barley have a protein called gluten. And gluten's always been there, but the way now that our food is produced, like wheat, the wheat that we're eating today is not the same wheat that our grandparents ate. It has changed over the years because now it's high yield, and unfortunately they do spray it with a lot of pesticides, right? So what they're finding is gluten content has kind of increased and people are becoming sensitive to it. Not everyone. Right? There's something called celiac disease. In celiac disease, that's a disease where if a person eats gluten, literally there's a whole like autoimmune response in the body, and literally the intestinal tract actually gets damaged. So people that are have celiac disease, and there's lab tests to see if you do, they cannot have any gluten at all. They can't even sometimes have gluten that's, even if something was made in the same kitchen. Then there are people who are sensitive to gluten. So when they eat wheat, rye, or barley, they might feel bloated, they might feel like lack of energy, they might feel kind of sick. And for those that do have autoimmune issues or inflammation issues, sometimes I do recommend like eliminating the gluten to see how you feel. Right? Some people are like, I don't feel any different. Okay, fine. But some people are like, wow, I feel so much better. But we don't know if it's the gluten or if it's the pesticides that's an issue. Because I've experienced this myself, as I know people who, when they eat breads here in the U.S., they have issues. But when they go travel, right, they're in Europe, they're in Pakistan, they're eating bread, they don't have any issues there. Interesting, right? Because it's grown differently, right? So anyways, that's a little side tangent, but people have started to think that if it's gluten-free, it's healthy for me. I'm going to eat gluten-free. Gluten-free breads, they don't have wheat, rye, and barley, but what they do have is like potato starch and like rice flour and random stuff like that, which is not necessarily all that much healthier either. And sometimes these gluten-free breads, if you ever pick them up, they're like really heavy. It's like a football, like it's really heavy. So just because something's gluten-free doesn't mean it's better. However, many manufacturers jump on this bandwagon. So they're like, oh, here's a gluten-free yogurt. Did yogurt ever have gluten in the first place? No. They're not lying, right? They're not lying, right? It's gluten-free, but people are like, oh my God, this is gluten-free yogurt. I'm gonna buy it. It's better for me. Gluten was never there in the first place. Do you see what's kind of happening here? Cholesterol. Cholesterol is only found in animal products. So if it has a mom or a dad, it has cholesterol. And I'm not going to get into cholesterol today because we don't technically have to read cholesterol on the label. For those that have high cholesterol, you need to be looking at fat on the label, not cholesterol. But anyways, so they'll start listing, like here's corn or vegetable oil, cholesterol-free. That never had cholesterol in the first place. So just kind of be careful of these type of labeling, because sometimes they're not lying, but it just didn't have it in the first place, but it's a way to draw people in. Right now, what I'm seeing a lot is plant-based. Oh, it's plant-based. And people are like, oh, it's plant-based, this is healthy for me. Not necessarily. So some of these plant-based meats, have you guys seen them? Like the Impossible burgers. What else is there? Impossible, what's the other one? I'm blanking out. Okay, good. Beyond Burger, things like that. And it's really interesting because they even put them next to the meat, right? Psychologically, to be like, oh, this is meat, but it's not. So the thing is, with those, yes, they don't have any animal products, but they're very, very processed. If you look at the ingredients, it's like soy-based isolate or soy protein isolate, and then canola oil, and then coconut oil, and then sodium. Like, it's not healthier. Is it a better alternative? Sure. Let's suppose you're, on a road trip. There's only a fast food restaurant. You're like, what am I going to eat? Okay, let me eat the plant-based burger. Okay, fine. That's a once-in-a-while type of thing. But those things are not products to bring and have at home all the time, right? Another thing that we see a lot of is all natural. It's all natural. And you're like, yeah, this is great. This is all natural product. Arsenic is natural, friends. And what is arsenic? Poison, right? Or the type of, it's an element, but it's not healthy. So just because something's natural doesn't mean it's automatically healthier. So just kind of be aware of that. I remember some years ago there was a commercial, and there was like two moms, and one mom's like, oh, this product has high fructose corn syrup, and the other mom's like, so it's coming from corn, right? That's natural, but the processing messed it up, right? So just kind of keep in mind, just because it's all natural doesn't mean it's all that much better. Some other sketchy terms: no sugar added. I'm drinking no sugar added juice. What does that mean? That just means they didn't add in sugar, but what about the sugars that were in there, right? So just kind of keep in mind, there's a lot of things that are out there. Fat-free. So if you see fat-free, if you see sugar-free, a lot of times when they remove fat, when they remove sugar, they remove flavor. And they will add something else. So fat-free products are usually high in sugar. Sugar-free products are usually high in fat. So just kind of keep that in mind. And a lot of sugar-free products have artificial sweeteners, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. Light. Light means that it's not necessarily it's lighter or lower in ingredients or lower in nutrients. It just means maybe the color is lighter. Like, for example, light brown sugar. It just means it's light, right? Low sodium soy sauce. Low sodium soy sauce means it's lower sodium than regular soy sauce, but it's still high in sodium. So just kind of be aware of some of these different terms. All right, you guys, we're hitting the 30-minute mark, so you guys want to move your hands around a little, move your feet. Some of you are like, whatever. Some of you want to just stretch a little bit. I'm still talking. You guys can move. So also, what we are finding more and more, and people get very confused about this, is organic. So how many of you, again, don't worry, I'm not judging. How many of you think that if it's organic, it's automatically healthy? It's okay to raise your hands. Okay, my mom isn't that, so if because we're led to believe that, right? Oh, it's organic. And what is organic? What does organic mean to you? What does that mean? Pesticides. It's natural. It's also more expensive. It's homegrown, right? So let's talk about this. What does this mean, organic? So there are actually regulations. There's actually, like, by law, it has to mean something. So it's like they can't just put organic on the label. There are certain criteria. All right? So what organic means is it has no synthetic fertilizers, no synthetic pesticides, and no synthetic herbicides. It doesn't mean it doesn't have any pesticides. It means that there's a certain list that they cannot spray on there. There are a whole bunch of organic pesticides they can use, which are a little bit better, but they just can't use synthetic ones, right? Also, organic means automatically that it's not genetically modified. So genetically modified, what they do is they'll take the genes of something and they'll add it to something else to enhance the flavor, enhance the shelf life. So for example, tomatoes. How many of you have grown tomatoes? Okay. Do they bruise pretty easy? Like if you drop a tomato that you grew on the ground, right? Whereas think of the tomatoes you buy at the store, right? Look at that. Like if you could go bowling with it, probably wouldn't bruise, right? Like it's different, right? So what they're doing is they're taking different, I guess, genes of other items and splice them in so that so things can last longer, for example, right? So that's why if you look at watermelons now actually don't have that many seeds, right? Like think about that in the last few years, right? Does this mean it's bad? We don't know, because this is relatively still newish, I guess you can say. It takes sometimes decades and decades for us to see. So I know a lot of people are like, no, I don't want GMO. It really depends, right? But organic automatically means don't worry about it. It's not genetically modified. Some years ago, I don't know what happened with it. I didn't really check. But some years ago, they were going to use cloned meats. So they were going to get animals and clone them, right? And use those meats. Now in Europe is very strict with their ingredients and with their whole food industry. So Europe was like, no, we're not going to do it. But the US was like, we're going to do it and we're not going to label it. So we wouldn't even know. So I don't know what exactly happened with this. Not to scare you, but I'm just saying there's a lot of policies in place that we just kind of need to be aware of. Also, organic foods means it's not irradiated. So they didn't add irradiation to make it last longer. And when I first thought of this, I'm like, I don't really see irradiated stuff. But then it was interesting because a couple of years ago, someone gave us Pakistani mangoes. And guess what? The Pakistani mango box said irradiated, like they had applied radiation so it could last longer and get here. So anyways, we do see irradiated produce and products out there. They will list them, but organic automatically means it's not. So those Pakistani mangoes were not organic. And then also these organic foods, they don't have any sewage sludge fertilizer. Doesn't even sound good, right? So automatically, when you're having organic, none of this stuff is applied. So does that affect the nutrients though? So the vitamins and minerals in my apple that's organic, is it going to be the same as the apple that's not organic? The nutrients are the same. So the vitamins and minerals are actually the same. The only difference is all these pesticides. And the thing is, you guys, we don't know the long-term effects of these pesticides. And again, I don't want to get into any controversies, but I know some years ago, again, a lot of cases kind of get hush-hush, so we don't really hear about them, but I know some years ago there was a farmer couple, and they actually both got cancer, and they both sued the pesticide manufacturer, saying that the pesticides is what caused their cancers. And then I don't know what, I think they settled. I don't know what exactly happened, but there are different things out there and we don't know the whole story. So that's actually why many people do prefer getting organic, because we don't want exposure to those pesticides, right? Some of those pesticides could be endocrine disruptors, which can mess with our hormones, which again, might possibly lead to cancers and other diseases. Like we don't know the long story yet. So when you see organic on the label, you guys, when you see 100%, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Quick question. You're saying that nutrients aren't affected. Wouldn't radiation affect the nutrients?
The radiation is more, again, just for preservation, right? Maybe a little bit might be a little bit affected, but on the whole, not as much, not as dramatically. But to be honest, like I said, we don't see that much irradiated products, right? You might see irradiated like a milk powder and things like that, but then you would just avoid, yeah. There, in terms of nutrition value, the nutrition value so far is pretty comparable, but again, we don't know the long-term effects of the GMOs. Yeah. So far, a lot of people are very for it. They're like, oh, look, we can have produce that lasts longer, right? So then we can send it, to the third world, for example. They wanted to, a lot of the third world, unfortunately, suffers from low vitamin A, and when you don't get enough vitamin A, that affects your eyesight. So they're like, okay, we're going to have GMO, like fruit, that people can eat that has more vitamin A. So there are benefits, right? But what is it doing long term? We don't really know. Yeah. So when you see organic on the label, everyone, when you see 100% organic, that means everything, every ingredient is organic. You will also see USDA organic. That means 95% of the ingredients are organic. Other 5% may not be so. Made with organic means that 70% of the ingredients are organic. But the USDA seal, again, it's very specific. So when you see organic, it really is organic. So don't feel like, no, I have to research more. It's the USDA symbol. They're pretty strict about what they label. Now, what about organic meat and poultry? Now, unfortunately, this is a whole other separate discussion. That's what we were talking about in the car, was how do we know the quality of our meat, right? Because we're concerned about halal, right? How was it slaughtered? But are we concerned how it was raised? That's a whole other story, guys. We won't talk about that. But ideally, we are hoping our halal meat is also raised humanely, and hopefully it's organic. So maybe we have to kind of ask our meat distributors, how are those animals raised? That's a whole separate discussion. But organic, what that means, because you'll see organic milk, right? You'll see these different type of things. So organic, when you see organic meat and poultry, it means they did not inject them with any growth hormones or antibiotics. Because think of our animals now, right? This is another thing I always hear from people, like, oh yeah, we used to eat meat, a lot of meat when we were younger. I'm like, no, people didn't eat that much meat. Now we're eating more meat, right? And think about how our meat has evolved. Think about chicken breasts, right? If you look at chicken breasts like in a different country, they're a lot smaller, right? I remember traveling once and we got some halal chicken and I was like, it's so small. Then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is how it's supposed to be, right? So they are injecting our animals, unfortunately, with a lot of hormones so they pump up fast so that we can get them slaughtered and get them out there, right? They're also, since these animals, they are raised very in tight quarters. So they will give them antibiotics so they don't get sick from each other. So guess what's happening? That stuff is trickling down and getting into our food supply. So some years back, it was actually interesting because they found that little girls, like age 5, 6, were hitting puberty at that age. And they were tracing it back to some growth hormones that were being injected into the cows that were ending up in the milk. Right? So that's been removed, but it's interesting because we do see a trickle-down effect. So these meats, these animals, they're fed organic feed with no animal byproducts. What does that mean? Unfortunately, you guys, in some of these feeds that the animals are eating, sometimes they'll have other animals mixed in there. I know, right? So sometimes that happens, but organic, we know that's not happening. Organic, these animals have some access to the outdoors. And at least 30% of the cow's diet has to come from organic pasture during the grazing season. What does that mean? So these cows, at least 30% of their diet, they're outside eating grass. So ideally for us, if we could buy grass-fed meat, that's going to be ideal. Because a lot of times these animals are fed corn and grain to get them fat, and that does change the nutrition composition of the meats. So we see more inflammatory compound, more omega-6s in those meats versus omega-3s, which are more healthier for us in grass-fed. So if we can get grass-fed, that would be ideal, right? Grass-fed, massaged. Okay, not okay, they don't have to be massaged. Those type of meats would be ideal for us. Now, organic dairy, this is when cows, again, same thing, they're fed organic feed with no animal byproducts. They don't have any growth hormones, antibiotics. They have to have regular access to pasture. And they have to be raised organic for at least 1 year before their products can be labeled as organic. So do I personally recommend organic milk? Yes. Especially, if you have young children, especially if you have the elderly, we do want to get organic as much as possible. Right? Organic eggs. Now, eggs are very confusing. Don't worry, the next slide will break it down even further. So organic eggs, same thing. Those hens are not fed any growth hormones or antibiotics. They are fed organic feed. And these hens, they must have year-round access to the outdoors. But what does that mean? It can mean different things. Maybe they just have access to a little patio and they're just running around there. Right? So they might not necessarily have organic, like, so they might not necessarily have access to like grass and you think that they're running around. They might just have a little bit of space, but it's still outdoors. So that technically does count. Now, if you take a look at this picture, what do you see? So on the left-hand side, you see what we ideally want to see, right? Chickens running around outside in the grass. But unfortunately, guess where a lot of these chickens actually live? On the right side, right? They're like in these big tunnels, right? And they're just all just kind of roam. They can't even move sometimes, right? And that's a whole other, subject matter of like just the conditions, the humane, non-humane conditions of where these chickens are raised. Sure. Exactly, right, exactly, because there's not enough space, right? But even within that, right, we want to make sure, because sometimes those chickens will just die and they're just dead there, and other chickens are pecking away. So we want to make sure, ideally, they have some, hopefully, humane living conditions. Not as much, right? Again, it depends on what they're eating, right? So organic versus non-organic, they are being fed different things, right? So again, ideally, we would want to get organic if we can. Right. So let's take a look at the cage-free, free-range, pasture-raised. It's very confusing when you go to the store. So cage-free means that those chickens were not kept in cages, but they were housed in these large indoor barns. And the conditions can still be crowded. So they're not in a cage, they're roaming around. But they could be in those tunnels. Free range means it's the same as cage-free, but they have access to the outdoors. But the USDA requires continuous access to the outdoors, meaning that they always should be able to go outside. But it might be, they didn't really define what that means in terms of how much space do they need, for how long, and so forth. Sometimes they just have a small patio door to a concrete or dirt patio even. So they may not even have access like that. So the gold standard is pasture-raised. So that's what we would ideally want to get. Pasture-raised means, and it's not regulated by the USDA, but there's third-party certification. It just means that the hens should spend most of their days outdoors. So that's kind of the gold standard. So gold standard would be pasture-raised organic, right? So the big question, should I eat organic? What do you guys think? It depends. Because junk food can be labeled organic. I got organic potato chips. I'm doing great. It's still a potato chip. It just means the potato wasn't sprayed with pesticides, so that's nice, right? But it's still junk, right? Now, organic produce, I just want to clarify, you guys. If I have organic vegetables and fruits and non-organic vegetables and fruits, there's not a difference in their nutrition. Okay, it's the same vitamins and minerals. The only difference is their pesticide exposure. And then it's up to you. And there is something called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And every year there's a third-party group called the Environmental Work Group that kind of analyzes all the different fruits and vegetables, right, to see which ones have the highest pesticide level. And again, not to get political, but now with these tariffs, things are going to change, right? Our accessibility to a lot of these different foods, the prices, all of that is going to be changing, right? I think we're already kind of seeing that. So they actually haven't put out the 2025 list yet. I think they're waiting for all this change to happen. I don't know. So this is the 2024 list. You can go online and check it out. So guess what the dirtiest fruit or vegetable is? Strawberries. Right? They're very, very high in pesticide. And it's not like, it's only they sprayed a couple of pesticides. Some of these things could have almost 100 pesticides sprayed on them over the course of their, growth. So strawberries are very high in pesticide content. Spinach, All the greens, collard greens, kale, all those mixed greens. I can't see from this angle, what is this? Okay, grapes, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, bell peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. So these are high in the pesticide content. So if you're like, okay, good, raspberries aren't up there. Maybe raspberries don't have as much, but they might still have a lot. So that's why they have a list called the Clean 15. So the Clean 15, these are fruits and vegetables that are very low in pesticides, so you don't really have to get them organic. So it's things like sweet corn, avocados, pineapple, onions, papaya, sweet peas, asparagus, honeydew melon, kiwi, cabbage, watermelon, mushrooms. So you don't have to get organic mushrooms if you don't want to. Mango, sweet potatoes, and carrots. I don't know, that's weird, it's not up there. So do you need to get organic banana? No, because it's a thick peel, don't worry about that. Now, I know you guys, when you're at the store, you're like, should I get the $9.99 blueberries? Or should I get the $5.99 blueberries, right? I know it's a big price difference. And like I said, things are gonna be changing even more in the next few weeks and months ahead. It's up to you. Right, so if you're like, look, I only eat blueberries once in a while, okay, then maybe you get organic because you're eating it once in a while. Or maybe don't get it organic because you're only eating it once in a while. You know what I mean? So it really depends on you. But I would suggest, again, if you have young children at home, if you have any immunocompromised family members, elderly, I would try to get the organic if possible. Right? But at the end of the day, it's up to you and your, financial situation, of course. Can I soak it? Yes, you could. So I know some people soak it in vinegar. Vinegar is a good option, but actually it's better to soak it in baking soda. So you can just do a little mixture of baking soda, water, or you can do water and vinegar, that's fine. Let them soak for a little bit. That kind of removes some, right? But there's still pesticides in there, but it's helpful. Yeah. Yeah, in that case, again, some of them are organic. If you could get organic, if not, it's still going to have some pesticides. If it's not organic, there's going to be pesticides. It's like, for example, if you're getting one of the dirty dozens, you're getting frozen strawberries, and they're not organic, it's still going to be pretty dirty, I guess you can say. No, but I don't want this to prevent anyone from eating fruits and vegetables. Please eat fruits and vegetables. We're not eating enough. All right? So don't be like, oh, it's not organic. I'm not going to eat this fruit. Let me go eat donut. No, like, what is that, right? You don't want to do weird things like that either. Okay. I hear patients like that. I can't even tell you how many patient stories I have. I have patients that are so worried about fruit. I have diabetes. I can't eat banana. But then they're eating pastries, right? So it's like, let's not vilify fruit. Everything is fine. Is everyone doing okay? Yeah. The A2 milk and then the regular milk. So it's interesting because the A2 milk, again, there's different proteins. There's some people can actually tolerate the A2 milk a little bit better than the A1. So again, it's just a matter of just like the proteins, and then there's also lactose-free milk. You see lactose-free and non-lactose, and there's regular milk. So lactose is a milk sugar that we find in milk. And for many people, they don't have the enzyme to break it down. So they actually have trouble to handle it. So we're kind of seeing the same thing between non-A2 milk and A2 milk. So people can handle the A2 milk a little bit better. So it's really up to you. In terms of nutrients, it's not different. It's just a matter of how people are processing it. Everyone doing okay? Yes.
So I have 3 kids at home, so I'll usually get the whole milk and I'll get grass-fed. But sometimes I'll see the option for omega-3.
Yeah.
Do you recommend that? Or should I give it to them separately? Or is that something we should get from fish?
That's a great question. So omega-3s, omega-3 is actually really helpful. It's for anti-inflammation, so it brings the inflammation levels. We're finding that it could help with perhaps with brain health, heart health, so much more. So ideally, omega-3, some of the best sources of omega-3 are actually fish, like fatty fish. So things like salmon and tuna, trout, sardines, mackerel, herring, things like that. All fish have some omega-3s, but those are the higher ones. Those are the best sources, the best absorbed. But if someone's like, I don't like fish, I don't want to do fish, then we can still get omega-3s from flaxseed, from chia seeds, soybeans have omega-3s as well, even canola oil, but that's a different story. We'll talk about that later. So in the milk, the omega-3 milk, what happens is they will feed the cows, some omega-3 rich foods, or they'll maybe add some in the milk itself. So that's fine. If it's not too big of a price differential, you can do that and also get omega-3s in other ways. So that would be okay, yeah. Okay, are we ready now to dive into our food labels, everyone? So if there's any food, again, you guys, everyone, you did not follow the assignment. We were supposed to bring labels. But it's okay, I know you guys. Okay, one person did, saving the rest of the crowd. Okay, great, yay. And we have some here too. But again, we have our phones, right? So if you're like really curious about a food, this is the time to pull it up. And if you want to share, so we want to make this interactive, everyone. So let's suppose you're like, okay, I made it to the grocery store. I have all this knowledge. Now what do I do? So you guys, I do not recommend you go to the grocery store and spend all day looking at labels. That is very sad. Don't do that. Just pick one thing at a time. Today, I'm going to investigate bread. Today, I'm going to investigate my yogurt. So whatever foods you eat on a regular basis, investigate those. So, and it's very confusing, right? So the best thing to do, honestly, is when we go to the store, okay, so you got your product. Okay, I'm not endorsing this product, I'm just showing you. So don't be like, oh, Roohe said I can have evaporated milk. Actually, you could, but just giving an example here, okay? So remember, the front of the label is a commercial, right? This is like, oh, Kirkland evaporated milk, our best free, so it doesn't have that growth hormone, right? This is not a very exciting label, this is very boring, actually. Right? But they have other labels that are very exciting, right? Whole grain. This one is, okay, this is a boring label too, you guys. Fritos, this is just original. Okay, I have boring labels. Does anyone have any exciting labels? Okay, no problem. And now labels even have QR codes, so you can kind of see what's going on here. There's even a Facebook group for this. Anyways, so once you have your label, turn it over and look at the back of the label, okay? And take a look at the ingredients. And the ingredients are going to be, I know, in small print. If you need to take a magnifying glass, don't feel shy about it. Do what you got to do, right? So the ingredients are going to be listed there somewhere on the label, usually in microscopic writing. So when you're in a rush, just look at the ingredients. Right, so this one is corn, vegetable oil is corn, and our canola oil and salt. Very, very basic ingredients here. Does this mean it's good? We'll talk about it. But the less ingredients, the better. So if you pick something up and you're like, wow, this is a whole PhD thesis. This is huge. I don't know what's happening here. Do you really want that in your body? No, right? So you have to ask yourself, because you are what you eat, right? Literally. This is going to break down. It's going to become part of our body. So you have to ask that question to yourself. And for those of you that have, young kids that really like some of these ultra-processed products, ask them. Say, hey, what is that? Can you even read that? Right? So the less ingredients, the better. Right? So ideally, you guys, I know some people out there that they will not buy products with more than 5 ingredients. So then I know they would probably buy the Fritos. I'm just kidding. This literally only has 3 ingredients. But the less ingredients, the better. So sometimes you buy an item. So let's suppose you buy Dave's Killer Bread. Just giving an example. I'm not endorsing any products. 21 grains. So on that label, it's going to be long, right? Because what are they going to do? They're going to list all the grains, right? So in that case, that's okay. So if you buy a label and you see ingredients, there's a lot of ingredients. If you understand them, oh, these are all grains. Okay, fine. But if you pick up ingredients, you're like, I don't know, monodiglycerides and, calcium phosphate, diphosphate this. And if it's very confusing, maybe you want to pass on that, right? So ideally, the less ingredients, the better. But let's suppose you buy a product that has more than 6 ingredients. Okay, that's fine, right? But if it has more than 6 ingredients, what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at the first 3 ingredients. Okay? So if this is only if a product has a lot of ingredients. If it's only 3 ingredients, this is not going to work. Like, this is not going to work on this product. But if it has more than 6 ingredients, you look at the first 3 ingredients, and keep in mind, you guys, that ingredients are listed in order of weight. So whatever is the first ingredient, there's a lot of that in there. So going back to my Oreo cookie example that I was mentioning earlier on, what do you think the first ingredient of Oreo cookies is? Sugar. I want to hear from the kids in the back. How about kids in the back? What do you guys think? They're like, oh no, mom dragged us to the wrong thing. It's sugar, right? That's what there's a lot of, right? So the first 3 ingredients is what there's a lot of. So you want to avoid seeing any sugar, any fat, any salt, or any enriched flour. And I'm going to talk about enriched flour. What does that even mean? I'm going to talk about that coming up. Don't worry. So how are your products going there, guys? Some of you have pulled up some products. Yeah. Yeah. All of them. You want to look at all of them. So if within those 1, 2, 3 ingredients, let's suppose you buy your yogurt and you're like, okay, it's milk and then, oh, sugar. That means there's a lot of sugar in there. Everyone here has healthy products. I'm seeing all these healthy products going around. I was hoping for some non-healthy products. Okay, next time you guys, I'll bring the non-healthy products. Okay, who has non-healthy? Okay, tell me about non-healthy.
My kids wanted this, you know those pudding.
Oh, yes. Your daughter's like trying to hide. Okay.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, let's read it.
Okay. Water, non-fat milk, sugar.
Okay, water, non-fat milk, sugar.
Modified cornstarch, palm oil, and then less than 2% of cocoa, salt, sodium, what's the long name? Sodium stearolactate,
Sure.
natural and artificial flavors, disodium phosphate, and then food color, number 5 yellow.
Okay. There's a lot going on in that. There's a lot going on in there, right? So the thing is, right away, what was something that we saw right away? Sugar, right? The second ingredient. But it's pudding, right? So I'm not going to expect to see, sugar anywhere else in the pudding. So then it depends how often are you eating that. So if you feel like this is once in a while, this is our Juma treat, we just want to have it, okay, fine. But if you're like every day this is going in my lunch pail, maybe not, right? So we also have to be practical, right? On how often that we're eating something, right? But ideally, we would look for something that maybe didn't have sugar earlier on in there, right? And again, easier said than done, you guys. I totally get it, right? Because it's tough. So let's suppose, here's just an example of this is actually, I think, a sugar, or a cookie, I believe. So the very first ingredient is enriched flour, which we do want to avoid, and I'll tell you why later. And then in parentheses, it lists what is in that flour. So there's wheat flour, niacin, reduced iron, folic acid. So when we're counting the numbers of ingredients, just ignore the parentheses, because that means it's just listing what's in that item. So in this case, when I'm counting, I'm only going to count enriched flour, then I skip and then I go to sugar, and then semi-sweet chocolate chips. Right, so 1, 2, 3, and guess what's in those first 3 ingredients? Things we want to avoid anyways. Right? Now let's suppose you're like, okay, I'm gonna look at the label for olive oil. What is the ingredient of olive oil? Oil. So is this gonna work there? No, it's not gonna work. Right? Does that mean I can't buy olive oil? No, you can buy olive oil. Right? That's fine. This tip is for those items that have a lot of ingredients. It helps us to kind of triage. So let's suppose, you're at the store and you're like, I want to buy this bread. So look at the first 3 ingredients. If you see sugar within the first 3 ingredients, buy a different bread. Maybe find one that the sugar is in the 4th ingredient, right? So this is helpful for items that you're going to be using on a regular basis. Now, if it's a once in a while thing, like, oh, we're having a party and I'm going to get this dessert and obviously it has sugar, okay, fine, right? But otherwise, we want to try to avoid that. Does that make sense, everyone? We're okay with this? So if you're in a jam, this is the first thing to read. This automatically helps us right away. Oh, this is junk, forget it. Let me look for something else. But let's suppose you picked up something, you're like, okay, this is okay, this is not looking bad. Now what? So now what we're gonna do is read the nutrition panel. And we're at another 30-minute mark, so if you guys wanna just kind of, stretch around, move a little bit, go for it, get those, get the circulation going, go for it. Some of you are over it, but anyways. So once you've kind of triaged, everything looks okay. Now we look at the nutrition panel. Does fruit and vegetables have nutrition panels? No. So that's fine, right? Don't worry about it, right? But processed foods will, and they have to by law. So when we're looking at the label, the first thing we should look at is the serving size. So let me see here. The serving size is here, in this case, is one whole package. What's the serving size of your pudding? One pudding, right? So the serving size, you guys, doesn't mean this is all you can eat, right? If you're like, oh, the serving size of my ice cream is 2/3 cup, so I have to eat 2/3 cup. No, the serving size is set based on what people usually eat. It doesn't mean that's what you should be eating. Does that make sense? So, and this has actually changed in the last few years. They wanted to make the labels a little bit more realistic. Several years ago, like something like this, the serving size was half the package. And who is eating half these chips? Nobody, right? They would eat the whole chips. So they are making the serving size a little bit more realistic. But still, it can still be less than we might want to eat. So for example, there are some, crackers or chips or whatever where it's like 4 crackers. And let's suppose you're eating 10, right? You have to multiply accordingly, right? So in this case, this is 1 slice. What if I'm eating 2 slices? I'm eating a sandwich. What do I do with all these numbers? You have to double it. What if I'm eating half a slice? You got to half it. So you have to take a look at how much you're eating. You'll also see servings per container. So you guys see that on the top, servings per container? So servings per container means that if you eat the whole container, how many servings you're going to eat, right? So here, what do we have here? We have some Thai lime and chili almonds. Is this good? Okay, so this might break someone's heart. Just kidding. So we'll evaluate. So in this case, the serving is 1/4 cup. Okay, 1/4 cup. But let's suppose, I'm driving on a road trip. I'm just eating as I'm driving, or I'm, working on something. This is sitting next to me, and next thing I know, that by the end of the afternoon, I ate the whole thing. Very possible, right? Because it's tasty. Guess what the servings are if I ate the servings per container? 11. So if I ate this whole container, I have to multiply everything times 11. Someone have their calculator out? Are you guys ready? I just need one person. So the calories in 1/4 cup is 190. But I'm eating all of this. Someone multiply 190 times 11. Some of you are like, I don't want to know. 2,090? 2,090. And just to kind of give you an example, that usually the recommended calories for women roughly can range from like 1,200 to maybe 2,000 if you're kind of active per day. This is a day's worth of calories. And it's very easy to eat, right? How many of us are thinking about the Costco nuts that we have at home? I know I am. Right, the big container, I don't know if anyone's seen it. Nuts are very dense in calories. They are very high in calories. It doesn't mean it's bad, you guys. It's not bad. I'm not saying don't eat nuts. But they have a lot of fat in a little amount. It's good fat. Yes, it's healthy fat, but it's still fat, right? So our body's not like, oh, it's good fat. I'm not going to count it. No. Our body's like, oh, it's fat. I'm eating a lot of fat. This is going to convert into fat and weight. So for nuts, actually the recommendation, you guys, is to have nuts every day. We should have nuts, walnuts, almonds, but only a handful. Literally what the serving size is, 1/4 cup. So sorry, whoever this is, space this out over a week, right? So as you can see, things add up really fast. And that's why it's helpful to look at the label to kind of see what's going on. Okay. So let's talk about calories. Now, you guys, I'm not a fan of calorie counting and people getting obsessed with calories because a calorie is not just a calorie, although we're led to believe that, right? Let's suppose I have a peanut butter jelly sandwich, right? I have, Ezekiel bread, whole sprouted grain bread, which actually is more of an ideal bread. I have some natural peanut butter, right? I have some preserves from my neighbor's tree. I don't know, very natural, okay? A peanut butter jelly sandwich. And let's suppose I have a protein bar, right? A protein bar. And let's suppose that protein bar is less calories than my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Which would actually be better for my body? Why is the peanut butter jelly better for your body? It's natural. Our body's like, oh, I understand this. Whereas the protein bar, you guys, what is happening in that protein bar? Right? So even though one has less calories, we're looking at the quality of the calories. That's what's going to be really, really important. All right? So use calories just as reference points. Because the thing is, you guys, if we do have high calories, what is going to eventually happen to one's weight? It will go up, right? That's just a fact of the matter, right? So what happens, unfortunately, my friends, is that when we are eating foods, when we're eating excess calories, right, we have our fat cells, and we're born with a certain number of fat cells. But when we eat a lot of calories, guess what? Those fat cells, our body uses what calories it needs for energy. Whatever is left gets stuffed into those fat cells. So those fat cells get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then guess what happens? They divide. Now I have 2 fat cells. Those fat cells get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now I have 4. And then when we lose weight, those fat cells shrink, but guess what? They don't go away. All right? Now, I don't want you to get scared. Okay, no, I'm never going to eat. I'm going to starve myself. I'm not saying that either, you guys. I don't want to scare anyone. But I just want us to know and just be aware. Let's kind of be smart about what we're eating and how much. So this is just a recommendation just to give us some guardrails, okay? So when you're at the store and you're like, oh, I'm going to order that burrito and it's 2,000 calories. That is a lot of calories, right? So for meals, ideally, again, you guys don't get obsessed with this. This is just putting things in reference. Ideally, maybe 500, 600 calories, give or take, right? Let's suppose next week's Mother's Day, you're going to eat stuffed French toast. It's probably more calories than that. Okay, fine. As long as you're not doubling it. We should not be having 1,000-calorie meals, right? So just think of this, again, as guardrails. And for snacks, about 100 to 200 calories. This really adds up, right? Let's suppose you're at, we're boycotting Starbucks. You're not at Starbucks. You're at Coffee Bean, right? You're going to get your latte. Has anyone looked at the calories on those lattes? It is like crazy. It could be 500, 600 calories there. And then you're like, oh, hey, oh, there's a scone here. Oh, I am a little bit hungry. And those scones can be another 500 calories. So all of a sudden, you made a little pit stop. That could be 1,000-calorie snack. So you see how I'm just, things are adding up, right? So just kind of use this just like as guardrails, all right? You guys want to take a quick break for 5 minutes really quick? Everyone want to take a quick? Okay, let's take a quick break. And then we're going to dive into some other things. All right, we'll talk about percent daily value, fats, sugars, enriched flours, artificial sweeteners, all that good stuff. So let's take a quick 5-minute break just because I want us to be awake. If you want to get some tea, if you want to take a look at your labels over there, go for it. We'll take a quick break. Everyone ready? Well, ready or not, I'm going to start talking. So my mom pulls out this little Sonf packet. She's like, analyze this, and I'm like, this isn't Urdu, but though there are ingredients in English. So it's pretty basic: fennel, coriander, sesame seed, peppermint flavor, and NN sweetener. Oh, it has a little saccharin in it. We'll talk about it. So this is actually a good example. Sometimes you see these like natural flavors, right? And you're like, what is natural flavor, right? We don't know, right? So it was interesting. I saw this on Food Network once. They had this episode, and at that time, red velvet was very popular, right? Red velvet cake and red velvet this and red velvet that. So they were showing that the food coloring that they were using, the red food coloring, was coming from beetle. Okay, it's not a beetle blood, don't worry. But it was some sort of beetle-related thing. And they listed it as natural coloring. It's natural, right? It's a beetle, right? So it's interesting when you see some of these like natural flavorings, natural colorings, what it could exactly be, right? So a lot of times, if we're concerned, right? As Muslims, we are concerned. Like, we want to also make sure we're eating things that are permissible to eat. So it doesn't hurt to call the manufacturer, go to their website, right? We can make a movement that we want to see more healthier ingredients on our labels, right? Okay, so let's dive back in and let's talk about percent daily value. So on the labels, you will see these little percentages. I'm going to be honest, you guys ignore them. I personally ignore them because they are related to if a person is on a 2,000 calorie diet. Some people are, some people are not. So it's not like 100% accurate, but it's a good tool to see overall kind of what's going on. So if you see 5% or less, consider that a low ingredient, right? If you see 20% or more, consider that a high ingredient. So for example, if you're looking at fiber, right? We want to have more fiber, right? I want to see 20% or more. If I am picking up a product and it has fat and it's like 100% fat, that's scary. That's going to tell you what? There's a lot of fat in that product. And maybe I need to not eat this, right? So percent daily values, they're there. They're helpful, but honestly, when we are at the store, we're in a rush, we just want to kind of get through things, you looked at the ingredients, now we're going to analyze the nutrition panel, ignore the percentages, all right? Okay, let's talk about fat. So, to be honest, the thought process on fat is kind of changing a little bit. We'll see how things pan out in the next few years or so. But as of right now, for our group here, generally speaking for women, we want to kind of aim for roughly 50 to 60 grams of all fats per day, approximately. Now again, you guys, you don't have to analyze this. I don't want you to be like, let me calculate everything, 5 grams, this is what I ate. This is just helpful, again, as an overall tool. So let me just give you an example. Movie popcorn. Right, so you're at the movies, you're buying the popcorn. Can anyone guess how much grams of fat movie popcorn is? 60 grams of fat, you guys. Right, Subway tuna sandwiches. Let's not talk about that because there was a whole controversy some years ago. Is that real tuna? Is there something else in there? I don't know how many people are eating that, but even like those Subway tuna sandwiches, right? 30 grams of fat. It's coming from the fish, which is fine, but it's also coming from the mayonnaise, right? So fat does add up. We honestly don't have any fat requirements per se, even that's kind of moving. This is just, again, a generalization, just to kind of give us an overall picture, right? So when you look at the label, it's going to say total fat in bold print. That tells you all the fat that's in that product. And for those that do have high cholesterol, want to look at how, I know what's happening, okay, here we go. So you do want to take a look at what you're eating. Okay. If this dies, don't worry, I can talk loud. So again, for those that have heart conditions, you do want to look at how much fat you're having, but more importantly, you want to look at the quality of the fat. There's different types of fat. So saturated fat, this is the type of fat that we find in animal products. So all animal products have saturated fat. Like if you have like a steak, you can see all that saturated fat, right? Lining the steak, right? So saturated fat is solid at room temperature. Okay, so it's solid at room temperature. We do need some saturated fat, right? But high amounts of saturated fat, this is what causes our body to make more. Some people make more cholesterol than other because your liver is super efficient. So again, for those with high cholesterol, you want to kind of watch how much saturated fat that you're consuming. Saturated fat also comes from coconut oil and from palm oil. And I know many of us are thinking, oh, good for me, I thought I can have it. You can, but it's not the ideal oil to cook with, I'm going to be honest, right? Reason being that the way our diets are, the composition of our diets, we are consuming a lot of different types of saturated fats. So we want to kind of reduce that down. So it would be better, honestly, to cook with avocado oil or olive oil temperatures. Okay? Coconut oil, if you are maybe cooking at very high temperatures, maybe you're baking something, you want to use coconut oil instead of butter, that would be okay. But even then, just look at the big picture. We don't want to be having a lot of this. And again, this might change. Who knows? Maybe in a couple of years I'll come back and say, everyone use ghee and use butter. But right now, we're kind of just the way our population is. And especially for those that are South Asian, we have a higher susceptibility of heart disease. Just as South Asians, this is in our genes, right? So we want to kind of just be careful of some of this. Trans fat is another fat. Luckily, it's been banned, so I'm not really going to talk much about it. But this was a fat that was created, I think, I don't know, in the early 1900s to extend the products, right? So think about it. Like, for example, breads and things like that, they don't last that long. But manufacturers were like, you know what, we can't have breads that go bad after like a couple of days. How is this good for profits? So this oil was created, this type of fat was created, hydrogenated oil, where it would extend the products. So basically what would happen is you could, like creamers, leave creamers out. You don't have to refrigerate them. Margarine was like very, very yellow. Right? Margarine has evolved over the years. Right? It used to be purely hydrogenated corn oil. But now they've changed that up. And we'll talk about that because I know many of you want to know, should I have butter? Should I have margarine? What should I do? And margarine is no longer called margarine. It's called vegetable oil blend or vegetable oil spread. Have you guys seen that? So they even are changing the marketing on that. So don't worry about trans fat. Trans fat, we should see 0 on the label. So when you take a look at the label, you'll see total fat in bold print. And then underneath, you will see saturated fat and trans fat. There are other fats in there that are not included. So for example, you're looking at this label, you're like, okay, it says total fat 1 gram, but it says 0. Where is this imaginary fat coming from? So it's coming from fats that they didn't list. So monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, which are okay, right? So overall, long story short, you guys, if you want to be very advanced, for every 100 calories of a product, you want to try to aim for 3 grams of less. All right, is this getting annoying where it's going in and out? Do you want me to take this out? It's okay? All right, so you want to aim for 3 grams or less per 100 calories. So let's suppose you buy something with 500 calories. Okay, math time. How many grams of fat do we want to aim for? Okay, 15 or less. Okay, you got an A+. So you want to take a look at that. So let's take a look at this Fritos. Okay, again, I'm not endorsing you guys. This has 160 calories. So let's round up to 200 just to be fun. So how many grams of fat would I want to see in this product for this to be considered low fat? 6. Can anyone guess how much total fat is in here? 10. So this is more than we want to see, right? This is not a low-fat product. So again, this would not be something I'm having all the time because, again, the fat is a little bit more than we want to see. Now, if you're like, Roohe, I'm looking at peanut butter, or in this case, let's take a look at nuts, right? Nuts, this is a fat. So this is 190 calories. So again, we're going to round up to 200. So we want 6 grams of fat or less. This has 15 grams. So now you're thinking, oh, well, then I'll eat Fritos. No, but you guys, what is the quality here? Which is better for our bodies? This, right? It's a fat, but it's a healthier fat than what we're finding in here. But still, it lets us know that don't go crazy with this, right? We talked about 2,090 calories, right, in this whole package. So we want to also look at how much we're eating, but we want to make sure we're picking better quality fats. You guys are okay with this? And saturated fat, we want to aim for 1 gram or less per 100 calories. So let's take a look at here. So this has 1.5 grams, which is fine, right? Because it's, again, the healthy composition of the nuts. Whereas this one has, let's see, 1.5 as well, right? Okay. So overall, for saturated fat, this is the fat that could potentially get in and clog our arteries. Long story short, there's a whole process to it. So we want to watch how much saturated fat we're having. We want to have more of the monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats coming from nuts, coming from seeds, avocado, right, olives. For the oils, again, the recommended oils would be to use less oil. That's the first recommendation, right? Use less. And even if you get the sprays, right? I've seen people like, yeah, I'm using spray. And then how are they spraying their pans? Shh, right? And how much oil ends up coming out? A lot. So just also watch that as well. It's really interesting. I wish I brought that. Have you guys ever seen the serving size of those oil spritzers? You know, those like little oil sprays? The serving size is literally like seconds, like 1/4 of a second. So go home if you have those and look at the servings. It's really interesting. Anyways, all right, so fat's not bad. I don't want us to be scared of fat, but we just need to pick better quality fats, right? So like butter, for example, right? Yes, I know our body understands butter, but butter is still a saturated fat. So this is, again, something we don't want to go overboard with. So if you have to decide between butter and those vegetable oil spreads, it really depends. If you buy one of those vegetable oil blends that are made with like olive oil or avocado oil, right, and the ingredients aren't so crazy, then maybe those might be a little bit better than the butter. But both, we should still try to reduce how much we're having. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so you'll see this on the labels. You'll see, you know, fat, any type of oil, shortening, margarine. We want to avoid partially hydrogenated. If you see partially hydrogenated, just run away. That is those trans fat that actually is banned. So I don't know why it's in the products, but it might still be roaming around there. Mono and diglycerides, interestified. I know mono and diglyceride, this is a whole other issue, right? Is it coming from animals? Is it coming from vegetables? What about halal? This and that. So most of them are plant-based, right? You can check and call the manufacturer if you want. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but most of them we are seeing mostly from plants, and they're just fatty acids. Okay. Any questions on fats? Yeah. Interestified. It just means it's just the way that the fat, how they're stabilizing the fat, because fat can go rancid. And that's something to kind of think about, you guys. So for example, nuts and seeds, ideally it's better to buy them raw. Because when we're heating them, we're changing the composition of the fat, right? We can actually damage the fat. And that's why it's actually not recommended. This is going to become a sensitive subject, but I'm just going to say it. I know many people, I will not name names, keep using the same oil. They'll like fry their samosa and they're like, okay, well, it's clean. I'm going to use it again when I'm making something else, right? And it's sitting there next to the stove, right? Ideally, everyone, we don't want to do that. Each time you heat and cool, you're damaging that fat. And guess what? When it's at high temperatures like this, up and down, it could be potentially carcinogenic, cancer forming. And cancer, as we all know, is on the rise. And I think Amna, one day, right, soon, you'll have a conference here, right, regarding that, inshallah. So we want to kind of limit our exposure to some of these carcinogenic compounds. We do know that cooking at high temperatures, right, can affect the integrity of the fat. Also, like when you're cooking meats at high temperatures, and like, you're like, oh, I like that charred part, right, the burned part, that also has potentially carcinogenic compounds in there. Right, so we also don't want to, be cooking these meat to the point where they're like charred, like that black part, and then eating that. That's a whole other separate conversation for whenever you're having that conference. Yes. So grapeseed oil, sesame oil, vegetable oil, corn oil, all of these oils and the seed oils, right? These are high in omega-6s. So omega-6 and omega-3, these are essential fatty acids we need in our body. Our body doesn't just make these fats, it relies on us. So omega-6 is okay, but what we're finding is if we consume too much omega-6, and omega-6, unfortunately, we find in a lot of different food products. If you see soybean oil, you see sesame oil, and the soybean oil that we see that's used here is not organic. Soybean, we want it to be organic, right? But the US produces a lot of soy, and it's not necessarily organic. So what happens, long story short, is too much omega-6 actually can increase inflammation levels potentially. And inflammation can drive a whole host of different issues. So omega-6s we actually want to get down. And in our food supply, just the way that we eat, just the way things are, our omega-6s are high. Unfortunately, some of these oils, the seed oils, can be high in omega-6s if we're using a lot. So long story short, ideally, we don't want to use the grapeseed oil. I know it can handle high temperatures. I understand all that. But ideally, we kind of don't want to use that if we can. And this is going to be controversial because I know how people feel about canola oil, right? Canola oil, also very controversial, right? But if you have to decide between canola oil and grapeseed, actually canola is a little bit better. It actually does have omega-3s in it, interestingly enough, which is actually a little bit better. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So just the processing so that's why it kind of cancels things out. But if we just look at the nutrient value, actually for a long time we were recommending canola. I know some dietitians that still are like, okay, canola is okay. I'm more like, I would not use canola. But if you have to decide between those two, canola actually would be a little bit better, to be quite honest, just purely looking at the fat profile. But again, if you're like, look, I'm using grapeseed oil once in a while, I'm using it for a party, fine, right? But if it's your everyday oil, I would use avocado oil. Yeah. So tofu, yes. Tofu, I am a big fan of soy, but in small amounts and make sure it's organic. Yeah. I have tofu in the fridge right now at home. So, but the key is you want to make sure it's organic. Yeah. So going back to grapeseed, I know, because that was the whole thing with grapeseed oil, is for a long time people were pushing that, right? But when we look at it's still a seed oil, so it would not be something that we're using all the time. No, it's actually not. Yeah, it's not actually. Olive oil, the best oil, to be honest, is extra virgin olive oil. It actually has like a natural aspirin-like quality to it. So gut-wise, actually olive oil would be a little bit better, but overall, just fats in general, we want to get fat from its pure form. So I would rather you have the olives, I'd rather you have the avocado, and just really trying our best to use less oils as much as possible. I know easier said than done, but just like avocado oil is expensive. It's going to get even more expensive, which is kind of good because then it's going to force us to use less. Right? Yeah, you cannot cook. So yes, so that's where you would use the avocado oil. But if you're using like smaller, like lower temperatures, you're using it like as a, you know, like a dressing, then that would actually be beneficial. Yeah, yeah, if it's the beyond, so the extra version is like the first press of the olive. So it's not as processed. Then you move along and it gets a little bit more and more processed. Then the whole question comes up about single origin, multiple addition, you know, origin, like where is it coming from? So ideally, we don't want it to come from a lot of different places. The best oil, olive oil, we all know, is the Palestinian oil, right? There's a wisdom in that, right? Yes.
I get confused in that question because for a while they were telling us coconut oil was the best.
Yeah.
Then canola. And they keep changing it. So for everyday use, olive oil is the best one?
Olive oil or avocado. And to be honest, the coconut oil, as professional, like I never recommended coconut oil. Like us dietitians were like not on that bandwagon. That was like really like, oh, look at these countries, they're eating coconut oil, they're healthy. But those countries eating a lot of coconut oil, they don't eat like how we do. Right? So if you're eating the same way, people are not eating any processed foods, they're getting a lot of activity in, and then they want to have coconut oil, go for it. But the way that we eat, I can't tell you how many patients I've had over the years that come to us for high cholesterol because they switched over to coconut oil. So we want to just, again, we want to keep it moderate. If you want to use coconut oil, it is more stable. It can handle higher temperatures. So again, if there's certain things you want to cook in it, ghee as well, like if you want to use those things like, you know, sparingly as well, but those wouldn't be like the main thing that I personally would be recommending on a daily basis. You see what I'm saying? They're part of the profile, and I would pick those actually over the grapeseed, interestingly enough.
One last question. For a while also they were telling us not to drink soy milk.
Yeah.
And do oatmeal milk.
Yeah.
What's the best?
So even I'm not a fan of oat milk. You guys, it's just oats that they've just ground up. Like, what is that? Right? And then they add a lot of filler to it. So if you ever take a look at oat milk as the label, that's also very eye-opening. So cow's milk, you can do cow's milk, you can get organic, grass-fed, cow's milk. I personally drink organic soy milk. I know people drink almond milk, right? But when you're looking at the ingredients, the less ingredients, the better. Now, this is an interesting story. I wish I bought this label. So I usually have soy milk. They didn't have soy milk. And so I was like, getting almond milk. They like almond milk. Almond milk actually does not have any protein in it. We usually don't turn to milk for protein anyways, but if we are looking for the extra protein, then almond milk has nothing, right? Maybe 1 gram. So anyways, I'm like, okay, fine, I'm gonna buy almond milk, fine, whatever. So I'm like, let me buy almond milk that doesn't have a lot of ingredients. So it was like almonds and like water. So I remember I brought it home, and then later I was like looking at it, I'm like, there's nothing in here. It had no calcium, it had no vitamins, it had nothing. And I'm like, this is just, you know, almonds and water, which is fine, but there's no point to drink this, right? So when you're buying things like milks, you want to buy milks that don't have that many ingredients, ideally, and then double check that there's actually calcium in there, because we do drink milk for the calcium and vitamin D. Okay, any other question? Yes? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You do, again, you are destroying some of that, because again, if it's a lower smoke point, meaning that it can't handle high temperatures, so you have to take a look at what temperature you're cooking at, right? If it's like I'm just doing it quick, I'm in and out, okay, fine. But if you're like, oh, I'm letting this like saute and it's like, you know, taking its time, then I would do the avocado. Yeah. Who knows things, again, you guys, on the fat front, things are always changing, right? But we look at the research to see, you know, what's going on. So I know you guys, it gets super confusing. Another nutrient of concern is sodium. So sodium is in salt. It's not the same thing as salt, but it's in salt. So sodium, NaCl, sodium chloride, that's what salt is made up of. Now you guys, this is a reality, but unfortunately 90% of us will get high blood pressure at some point in our lives. That's what the stats are, right? As a population as a whole, right? This is another silent epidemic, as we are seeing high blood pressure on the rise. And especially in our population, there is definitely a genetic component. But also the problem is a lot of our foods, especially packaged foods, ultra-processed foods, are very high in sodium. So what do? So for sodium, everyone, the recommendation for the general population is 2,400 milligrams. And just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, now don't freak out, everyone. 1 teaspoon of salt has 2,000 milligrams of sodium. I know you're thinking, I use that like in the morning, right? So usually, the problem is not when we're cooking. You guys, when we're cooking multiple servings, we're not eating all of it at once. The problem is more packaged foods. The problem is more restaurant foods, right? Because salt makes things taste good. And salt, unlike sugar, we do need salt. Like, we don't want to be sodium free. We need some sodium. We can be sugar free. We don't need sugar, but we do need sodium. Try to aim for 600 to 700 milligrams per meal. So again, if you're like, oh, I'm going to eat this, you were showing me a label for mac and cheese. I'm eating this whole mac and cheese. This is my whole meal, right? You want to make sure it's 600 milligrams or less. But let's suppose I'm eating mac and cheese, I'm having my chicken, I'm having my salad, I'm having multiple things. So if you have multiple things going on, or let's suppose you're at the store and you're like, I don't know, am I going to eat this as a meal? Am I going to eat this separately? Then in that case, we want to try to see and aim for 140 milligrams or less. So let me look at our little Fritos here. This has 150 milligrams of sodium. So should I have this? It's more than 140 milligrams, right? But what if this is my whole meal? I'm only eating this for lunch, okay, not recommended. Then technically it's okay because we're allotting 600 milligrams per meal. It's not smart, right? But if I'm eating this along with other things, I'm having my sandwich, I'm having this and that, we want to make sure it's less. So same thing for things that you're buying on a regular basis. You're buying your bread, you have your yogurt, you want to try to get 140 milligrams or less. I'm taking a look here. This one only has 20 milligrams, so this is okay, right, sodium-wise. But sodium really, really adds up, everyone, very, very fast. So just kind of be on the lookout. You'll see it on the labels, sodium. Also, one of the nutrients that we do want to boost up, because unfortunately we don't get that much, is fiber. And fiber is really important, you guys, for our gut microbiome. All right, it helps our gut health. I think I'm gonna have to come back and do a whole another session on gut. But fiber also keeps us regular, right? We want to make sure we're having regular bowel movements because that is a way for our body to get rid of toxins, right? So that's a whole other issue too. So for women, we recommend 25 grams or more per day. For men, about 38 grams or more per day. So fiber only comes from plant-based foods. Like, I'm not going to get fiber from chicken, right? I'm not going to get fiber from fish. I'm getting fiber from plants. And ideally, when I'm picking a product that is made with grains or other plants, we want to see 3 grams or more, ideally. So if you're buying a bread and there's no fiber in there, what is happening? That's scary, right? We want to make sure there's at least 3 grams or more. So that's why we recommend whole grains. So when we are buying products, remember earlier I was talking about trying to avoid enriched flour? So enriched flour, it's a very stripped down type of flour. So let me explain. So as you can see in this slide here, on the left side we see the whole grain. So the whole grain has 3 layers. So it's got that bran, which is that outer layer. It's got that germ, which is like where this, the seed will sprout out from, or the little shoot for it to grow. And then the inner layer is the endosperm layer. So the bran and the germ actually is where a lot of the nutrients are. The fiber, the vitamins, the minerals, the healthy fats, those are in the bran and the germ, but a lot of times manufacturers remove them because they can cause things to get spoiled quicker. So they'll sell them separately, like oat bran, wheat germ. How many of you guys have seen that? Right? Oh, here's my oat bran, here's my wheat germ. It's just a component of the grain. Then they have this inner layer, this endosperm layer. That's all that's left. And that has a little bit more carbohydrate value, and it's missing a lot of the nutrients. Then they'll grind that up, right? And that is basically, then they'll wheat flour. So wheat flour is just that ground up inner layer. So when you see wheat, it's not the whole grain. We want to see whole wheat, whole grain, whole something. Multi-grain means it's multiple grains. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're whole. So don't get caught up with that, right? And then they'll bleach it, or then they'll unbleach it, right? And then they're like, whoa, we lost all these, nutrients. So by law, they have to enrich them. So enriched means they're adding nutrients back in. They'll add iron, they'll add folic acid, they'll add some B vitamins. But can we replicate what we lost in nature? We can't. They don't have antioxidants, they don't have phytochemicals, right? So enriched sounds very fancy, right? I have a friend that's super smart. She's like, oh, well, enriched means it's good for me, right? They enriched it. I'm like, no, it sounds like it's fancy, but it's not. We want to see whole grain. So same with things like brown rice. How long does it take to cook brown rice? A long time, right? 45 minutes. Whereas how long does it take to cook white rice? 15, 20 minutes, right? The reason being is brown rice has 3 layers that the water has to cook, right? Whereas white rice is just that outer layer. So same thing in the body. It takes time for our body to kind of break down all the layers. And for those that have blood sugar concerns, we want to get those whole grains because it's not going to elevate our blood sugars as quick. And to be honest, you guys, even if you have diabetes, pre-diabetes or not, as a population, we should be concerned about our sugar levels, right? Because excessive amounts of sugar and excessive and high blood sugars can actually increase inflammation. And that's a whole other, I need to talk on that too. There's a whole different topics I got for you. So we do want to make sure our blood sugars are under control. Also, when our blood sugars are up and down, spiking like this, it can cause us to feel hungry more often, right? And that can also affect our cravings. So that's a whole other story there to think about. So ideally, everyone, we don't want to do enriched flours. If you're like, oh no, but Roohe, I don't like brown rice, it tastes gross. Try cooking it in some broth, right? Or do half and half white rice, half brown rice, right? And even for kids, trying to get them to kind of adjust to these flavors. Maybe they have a sandwich with white bread and one bread is whole wheat bread as they start to kind of get used to it. So for whole grains, these are some examples of whole grains. So things like whole wheat, of course, amaranth, barley, buckwheat. So I'm going to be honest, everyone. Personally speaking, we should try to do our best to kind of get away from wheat, even if it's whole wheat, because it has really changed. It's not considered an ancient grain anymore. Ideally, we want to get these ancient grains. So like quinoa, barley. Barley is, a sunnah food, right? Bulgur. Millet. Millet is very interesting. Research is actually showing that just adding in like half a cup of millet every day can actually help with blood sugars. So if you have, again, people that have diabetes at home, or you're just trying to be cognizant of your sugar, incorporating millet. Has anyone ever here used millet? Okay, me neither. But maybe we can all try together. Uh-huh. Arsenic. Yeah. You could try it and then call me over because I want to try it, because I know with our certain foods, right? Like for example, it would just taste better with white rice, right? But if you're like, no, I want to experiment, I want to see, then yes, I would try some of those other grains or do a mixture of grains even and see how it is. Yeah. So arsenic is an issue. But the thing is, again, we're taking a look at the overall nutrient picture, right? We're still getting a lot of benefits from these other grains. So maybe you do want to eat less rice, maybe you want to soak it, even trying to find, and I gotta look into this a little bit more, if there's certain rice that is less in arsenic, yeah. Okay, and the question in the back and I'll come back,
So I have one bread that I really like that's really low in ingredients. It's called Inked. And so I'm reading the ingredients right now. It says organic unbleached wheat flour, and then in parentheses, organic wheat flour, organic malted barley flour. What is the malted part?
So the malted is, we'll see in the next slide, right? The malted part actually, I believe, is even a type of sweetener. I have to look into that a little bit more. So we see the malted barley. But the thing is, in that bread, the first ingredient was wheat. It wasn't whole wheat. So ideally, we would want to switch over. It's hard, you guys, with bread. And for those that are struggling with weight, this is actually one of the things I recommend is removing bread. And I know for many people it's, our staple of life, but try it out and see. There are other types of bread. You can even make your own bread. There's sourdough, a little bit better composition. But ideally speaking, you guys, at the end of the day, we want to get loose grains. So we want to have like the quinoa, for instance, the brown rice. There's even black rice. Black rice is even higher in antioxidant value. So you can make your biryani with that. And then let me know how it goes. Yeah. So actually for the blood sugars, what is actually recommended, you can soak it and do all that, but what is actually recommended is you cook your rice, you cook your potatoes, you cook your beans, and you let them cool. That cooling process will activate something called resistant starch, which isn't really well absorbed in the body, and it's actually really good for our gut microbiome. So what happens is and don't worry, you don't have to eat it cold, don't worry everyone, but the thing is you cook it, and then you let it cool. Please put it in the fridge, you guys. Let's not talk about food safety. But cook it, let it cool a little bit, put it in the fridge, and then later on you can heat it up. That process will actually help not elevate those blood sugars as high, and it's really good for the gut microbiome. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. You can drain, That will help on the starch front, yeah. I was throwing in the resistant starch. That's another little tip, you guys. And even freezing your bread. So you freeze your bread, and when you heat it up, that also activates that resistant starch too. The what? Yes, that's the one I like. But even then, I would just try to kind of tone down on the breads. But yeah, it's a better bread. Okay, so when we're looking at the label, we want to look for whole grain, whole wheat, stone ground, brown rice, oats. You want to see whole. That's going to be the ideal. So those are thumbs up. You're getting all parts of the grain. All right. I'm just going to go a little bit over if that's okay, since we started a little bit later. Is that okay? I'm almost done. So, I know they're coming in for prayer, right? Yeah, so let's speed through. So sugar. We already talked about this earlier. My friends, it's very addictive. There's no benefits to sugar. It just drives inflammation. I can do a whole presentation just on the effects of sugar. But we love how it tastes, right? So that's the problem. So when we are looking at the label, again, for those that have diabetes, we look at total carbs. But since not everyone has diabetes, I'm not going to get into that. But when we're looking at the label, we want to see 0 added sugars. 0 added sugars. Yeah, so what happens is when you see total sugar means natural sugar and added sugar. So for example, yogurt has natural sugar in it. It's called lactose. Don't be scared of that. So when you read, the label of yogurt, it'll say total sugar and it'll say something. But the added sugars are 0. But if I'm having strawberry yogurt, I'm going to be adding in sugar, right? So sugar-free products, they will add artificial sweeteners, which actually under added sugars because it doesn't affect our blood sugars. It doesn't get absorbed. So if I'm having Splenda, I'm having some of these other things, they're not absorbed in our body. So they will say 0, but they still are sweet. They affect our taste buds, still affect our brain. Brain thinks, oh, we had something sweet. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. So added sugars, we want to see 0. Now, the American Heart Association recommends that if you are going to have added sugars, for women, we want to have less than 25 grams per day, so that's about 6.5 teaspoons. For men, less than 37.5 grams, so that's like 9.5 teaspoons. So let's suppose someone has 3 cups of tea a day, and every time they have tea, they put 2 teaspoons of sugar. All right, so that's 2, 4, 6. If they're a woman, you reach your recommended amount, right? But that's not counting the sugar in that strawberry yogurt. That's not counting the sugar in my cookies. That's not counting my sugar in other things. So this is a big public health issue, because when we consume excess sugars, guess what happens, everyone? It becomes fat. It becomes triglyceride. So for those that have high triglycerides, you got to look at your sugars. And these are just some of the many names for sugar, everyone. There's like 100 plus names of sugar. So I think malted barley is in there. Or malt sugar is in there. Maybe not malted barley. I got to look into malted barley. But look at all these common forms of sugar used more and more. So people ask me, what's a good sugar? And I say, nothing. The best sugar is the one that you use the least amount of. Now, obviously, for us, as a sunnah food is honey, right? So honey does have benefits. It has high antioxidant. We want to use local organic honey. But the thing is, you guys, it doesn't mean we go crazy. Oh, honey is a sunnah food, right? We want to use sugar sparingly. And when we're using it, the less we use, the more we get used to. So let's just take a look. This is going to be really helpful when you go to read labels, my friends. So when you go to the store, so this is a real label that I have had. This is of yogurt. So in added total sugars there, you guys, it says 14 grams. Right, everyone see that? So 14 grams is natural sugar and added sugar. So then you look under. Okay, so how many added sugars are there? 11. So of those 14 grams, 11 were added in. 3 grams are just natural sugar. Now, don't worry about that. Now, if you want to calculate out, if you want to look like, oh, how many teaspoons of sugar am I eating? So you can take the added sugar amount in grams and divide it by 4. So in this case, this is 11 grams of added sugar divided by 4. What do we get? Almost 3 teaspoons of sugar. This is going to be mind-blowing, everyone, when you go to look at some of your foods, right? So a lot of times, foods have like 14 grams, 25 grams, like a lot of sugar. And grams doesn't mean anything to us, right? But if you convert into teaspoons, then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I don't know about this. Like, it would have been better, honestly, just to get plain yogurt and add a little bit of sugar, right? Because you could at least control that. Whereas this is like a 6-ounce container. It's like 3 teaspoons of, that's a lot, right? So it starts to add up. Then you might be thinking, okay, you know what? Forget it, Roohe. I'm just going to eat artificial sweetener. This doesn't even get absorbed in my body. It's 0. That's true, right? Artificial sweeteners, things like sucralose, Splenda, Equal. This one has saccharin, right? The thing is, same thing. We don't have long-term research. So when Splenda came out, everyone is very excited. Okay, Splenda is great. It's a component of sugar. Let's bake with it. Let's use it in everything. But what we're finding now after all these years is it really affects the gut microbiome. It can actually increase insulin levels. So it actually negatively affects us in the roundabout way. So actually, I don't recommend Splenda. So the yellow one, the pink one, all these things, like if you do not have diabetes, you do not need these sugars. If you do have diabetes and you want to use like pure stevia, where it's like literally just stevia like powder, right? And you just add a little bit in. Like I have seen that they literally have a little teaspoon. It's really cute, like a little bit. You can get a stevia plant, right? You can go to Home Depot, get a stevia plant. I had a patient once, she's like, I'm just chewing on the leaf. I was like, okay, go ahead. Monk fruit would be another option too. We need a little bit monk food. There's allulose is coming out. But I think just personally speaking, the thing with these artificial sweeteners is when we consume them, they can be 250 to 10,000 times sweeter than sugar. Imagine what it's doing to our taste buds. Right? So the more we eat it, the more when we eat fruit, we're not going to taste the sweetness of that. And then what happens is our brain is like, wait a minute, you ate something sweet, but where is it? We didn't absorb anything. So now I want sugar. So we get an increased craving. So xylitol, xylitol, maltitol, all these ols, OL, that means it's sugar alcohols. They're coming from sugar. They're not going to make you drunk. Don't think like that, you guys. It's not that. But they're a component of sugar, but they're absorbed slowly in the body. And they use it in a lot of sugar-free gums. They use it in sugar-free foods. Excessive amounts of those can actually cause GI issues. So people can get bloating, they can get stomach aches. I know with certain artificial sweeteners, people get headaches. So xylitol, erythritol is the one I want to talk about. Yeah, erythritol. Erythritol is actually used in a lot of these monk fruit, and it's cut in there. There was some research that came out a little while ago that erythritol might affect cardiovascular risk. It's kind of up and down right now. They haven't really decided. So personally, I just try to avoid it if possible, the erythritol right now, until we see how it plays out. Yes, but I would try to avoid if I could. Yeah. Yeah. So coconut sugar, date sugar, right? Monk fruit, those would be a little bit better. But even then, it depends on you. There's no sugar that you can be like, yeah, let me just put a lot. Just try to use less. Just chop up some dates and put those, right? Do a little bit of honey. But whatever you feel you can use a little bit of. And just because brown sugar is brown, you guys, doesn't mean it's whole wheat and organic and good for us just because it's brown. Brown sugar means they added molasses to it, right? So even honey, you want to make sure it's local, organic, right? But just small amounts, right? Yeah. All right, everyone. So I think I'm going to skip the preservatives and additives because preservative additives are added to foods. We do see that. And I'm going to skip this part. One last thing I want to touch on before I finish here and take questions is a lot of people are taking supplements, right? Vitamins and minerals and herbs. And okay, that's cool and everything. Just double check with your doctor because just because it's natural doesn't honestly also mean it might be safe, if that makes sense. There are certain things you don't want to mix, right? So if you're on certain medication, just talk to your doctor. You can talk to a dietitian. Is it okay that I'm adding some of this stuff? For example, some people take St. John's wort. That actually helps with mood, right? That might not actually be recommended if you're on certain medications. So just kind of be careful of the herbal supplements, the vitamins and minerals. You want to make sure that they are checked by third party. So when you're buying these, vitamins and minerals, make sure it has the NSF symbol or the USP symbol, because a lot of these vitamins and minerals and supplements, what they say they have in there, sometimes there's added stuff. There's lead, there might be arsenic. So we just want to kind of be careful about those. And sometimes you don't need all these supplements. So just double check. USF, that's USP. These are companies, third parties that will just double check what is in this ingredient, what they say is in this is actually in this. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I was watching a doctor yesterday on social media, and he was talking about even if it's a good supplement, it might be heavy for your liver to handle.
Yeah.
How can you kind of avoid that?
Yeah. So again, you have to just see if that's the amount in there and if what you're taking it for, right? So I can talk to you a little bit more about that. I think they're going to do that on, but in any case, everyone, thank you so much for having me here. I'm still here if you have any questions. Hopefully, inshallah, I can come back at a different time. We can do some other workshops. But at the end of the day, just to keep things simple, everyone, don't get overwhelmed, okay? Just go in, just pick one thing at a time, right? Look at the ingredients. Ask yourself, how often are you going to use this? And just try to have real food, right? That's going to be the most important thing that we can do. So with that said, everyone, thank you so much. And if you want to contact me, you're welcome. I can give you my email. And any other announcements?